Okay, with this section of your notes on the conducting system of the heart, what you're actually going to do is you are going to use your diagram on page 417 of the textbook to label this diagram. Now, what I do suggest you do is read the section that starts on page 416 with the conducting system and read that all the way through until it ends on page 418. Then because there is, like for instance, the bundle branches actually no, not the bundle branches. The AV bundle also has another name that you do need to know about. Then on the back side of that page is the steps in a contraction. And you have a baggie that basically has 3 strips of paper per step. There's 15 total. So each step of the contraction process will have 3 things associated with it. Basically, there's usually 2 things that are happening, and then one of them will be an elapsed time segment so that you understand what's going on. All right, so that is how you complete that section. So it should look very much like the things on 416 and 417. Now, I also want to give you directions in terms of the diseases worksheet before we do the worksheet that has the EKG deflections on it. Now, in the diseases worksheet, first of all, you need to make sure that the effects for angina pectoris, bradycardia, the cause of cardiac arrhythmia, the effect of rheumatic heart disease, the cause and effect of aneurysm, the cause of arteriosclerosis, the cause and effects of hypertension and hypotension, and the effects of varicose veins. All of those should be blocked off or not shaded in. Basically what you need to do is use the information that are in chapters 13 and 12 to fill in that information. Some of these diseases are detailed in the blue clinical notes, the blue and purple clinical notes that are found throughout the chapter. Some of them are actually embedded within the text itself, and still others of them are actually found as part of the end of unit information, like under the related clinical terms that precede the chapter review at the end of each chapter. So that's how you would complete those 2 things. Now, with the conducting system of the heart, we also have a worksheet there on the EKG. Now, an EKG stands for an electrocardiogram. I usually call it an EKG, even though cardio starts with a C, and that's actually typically what they call it now, is an ECG, but it just sounds a little strange to me. These steps, or this readout that's created on an EKG, is what doctors use to actually try to determine if there's problems with the heart itself. If you think of like a TV show like Grey's Anatomy or ER, when they're in a hospital room, that thing that typically beeps all the time is some sort of heart monitor. But this can also be a paper printout that they do. It just depends on the length of time that they're trying to monitor something. Nowadays, they actually have heart monitors that capture information electronically, and then the doctors can actually download that to their computers and analyze them in that way. So this is a single heartbeat reflected electronically, and we can break this down into 3 basic parts. And you can see here those 3 basic parts are bracketed on the diagram. Step 1, or bracket 1, is referred to as the P wave. And what is happening during the P wave is atrial depolarization. So the cells of the atrium are actually becoming depolarized and ready for contraction. We actually don't see the contraction itself reflected on the EKG simply because there's nothing electrical given off when the actual muscle contracts. It's before the contraction happens. Now, the letters bracketed by the number 2, QRS, that is referred to as the QRS complex. And that is ventricular depolarization. Now you'll notice the ventricular depolarization peak is a lot higher than the atrial depolarization peak, and that's because we've got a lot more muscle involved with a ventricle contraction than we do with an atrial contraction. Like with the P wave, the actual contraction of the ventricles takes place just after the peak there at R. So somewhere in here would the contraction take place for the ventricles, and somewhere in here would the contraction take place for the atria. The T, the number 3, is the T wave, and this represents ventricular repolarization. So the returning of the heart muscle in the ventricles to the resting state. Now, we don't see atrial repolarization on here at all because it's actually masked by the QRS complex. Because that is so large, it kind of hides it from us. So this is the 3 things that they're looking for, and sometimes we have a problem with the P wave, which creates problems further on down the line. Sometimes there's problems with the QRS complex, or maybe we're not repolarizing appropriately. Each of these can actually give the doctors clues in terms of, if it's a conducting system problem or if it may be something of a problem with the heart muscle itself. They have to kind of process of eliminate this, and this is a nice, non-invasive way to kind of determine that cause or try to narrow down the cause of someone who's experiencing heart problems. Now, you also have your heart dissection lab in your packet. I've crossed off things that are things that you would have had to have done actually physically with the lab itself. However, if you read through the questions using your book, I think you should be able to answer most of these questions. I've also sent along a copy of the actual procedure that they used as part of the dissection that has some of these pieces of information that you may not be familiar with, like chordae tendineae and that sort of thing. There are a couple of diagrams, and you are responsible for those. In fact, there will be one of that external heart on your test for this. Okay, so that's it right now for the cardiovascular system, and our next unit will be the blood.